Otsukimi here. Who else would it be? This is Observations with Otsu. This is Monday, June 24th. I hope you had a good weekend. The markets are already in full swing. We are down 7% for Bitcoin. We're not as down as much for other coins. And so, very interesting angle that we're going to look at. No theme for today because it's already, 4 hours until close. So I want to kind of get this through. It's going to be just hardcore technical. Really want to focus on the weekly actually, because I mentioned for about 2 weeks now that we would get a drop down like this. This is exactly what we're getting. So we're going to go into that details. We're going to do Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, and we might actually touch on a little bit more depending on the context. So that's the introduction. Let's get started. All right, so I won't waste too much time in this video. I know I tend to run very long on my videos, 40 minutes, 60 minutes sometimes. Just going to get to the nitty gritty as we're getting close to, the daily close. Market's already significantly shifted. A lot of people are losing interest. A lot of people are probably losing capital too, and I don't want them to lose capital. I have emphasized in my Nowhere Discord group that you should preserve your capital, and that should be the case here. My own trading portfolio, which is part of a paid service, so to speak, for lack of a better term, is something that I offer, and I have only traded 3 times in the past 2 weeks. Okay, and that's extremely low for me. That's extremely low for most people, and that is by design. I tell people over and over again, this is not a good time to trade. It hasn't been a good time to trade up until the past 24 hours, 48 hours. Really hasn't even been a good opportunity to short with size without like a tight stop or leverage, and you're going to get chopped up in that scenario, right? So I think that that's worth mentioning. Now, let's go ahead and go to the weekly. I'm gonna just start with Bitcoin, go top down, so weekly, daily. Might cover some lower time frames if they give context, especially with Solana. They might, because Solana's only down 1%, honestly, and so there's a significant shift going on here. Bitcoin is really taking the most heat here because both of these are really Bitcoin here. You can see Ethereum's only down 3%. Solana isn't really that much down at all. A lot of coins like Aave, which I actually was looking at, but I never actually traded, is doing almost 7%. There's other coins that are doing pretty well. In our group, we talked about Bowden and Trump, and they're both doing well. You have a presidential debate coming up this week, and both of those coins went down significantly last week, so it makes sense that they would rebound this week so far, and they're doing pretty good. We also are in a position with WIF doing pretty solid with that. And there's other coins that are doing pretty good that I'm going to reserve for the group. That's why it's there. It's only $20 a month. It's well worth your weight in Sats as far as that goes. The features are going to keep growing with that as well. So I guess this is more so like the introduction, but I guess I can kind of cultivate that, right? Like you can see, from an introductory standpoint, that Bitcoin is taking most of the weight here. And a lot of people are looking at the Mount Gox thing, which I can totally understand. A lot of people are looking at other things, which is really ironic because that was the whole point of the crash, like in 2012 or whatever. Like it was or 10, and now it's like causing things to go down more. It may or may not be doing it. I don't know. That's not my say. That's not my expertise as well. I look at pure price action, see where we're going. What did I say? I said on June 10th, I just put a post on X about that, where I kind of quoted my own tweet from June 14th, which was also a requote from June 10th. That hey, we are going down. We have signs of major high time frame weakness, and this has been the case, okay? And so this was that area right here. We've had 3 weeks of downtrends since, right? And so I was cautious ever since we had this weekly divergence. We actually pumped up here. So once we got to this candle, I kind of foregone that because we had this band breakout here, and then we touched back in this like, hey, I am concerned about this because this is not giving us what we need, right? And so now the band has turned. I think my original signal for this area was the Aroon band going gray, and that seems to have done so. And so now we're kind of in a full-fledged mode. We're down 6.5, almost 6.5% from here, looking pretty bad. From a price action standpoint, we could sweep the lows here. I'm not a big fan of using that as a price action application. I think it's worth mentioning, but a lot of people will use the term sweep the lows is because they think lows will get swept, which means price will come back down to its low point and then it'll come back up. I don't agree with that. History, in my opinion, has proved to me that that doesn't necessarily work outside of the actual trading day. Okay, and a good example is something like this: like you had drop down here, you had your lows swept here, and yes, it did go up, but then it eventually went back down. See what I'm saying? Now this is a weekly time frame. That's a quick example. That's not the best example, but it was on my screen, so I thought I would share that, right? And so things can go back and forth like this one. This swept the highs here, and so you had your swing pattern failure. So this would look like a bearish signal. Nope, it actually went up instead. So it's one of those things like same thing about swing pattern failures at the tops, like or a wick or things like that. Like those things happen at tops, but that doesn't mean they that doesn't mean that it happens and it is a top. Okay, correlation is not causation. Okay, so that's kind of what you need to understand with that. Now, as far as where this goes, we can kind of take a back. We can kind of take a look at this in the Bitcoin section and take it from there. But I do want to mention here that you know Bitcoin, outside of a few outliers like Uniswap, like Bitcoin is the hardest drop coin for the day, and that's extremely unusual. We got Ordi, which is fine, and Prime, but at least on my list, it's the third. It's the third worst performing coin on my list out of like 50 coins, and so that tells me something. That kind of tells me that one, I think altcoins primarily are exhausted here. There's a lot of coins that are touching their weekly points. It's a little more complicated to get into this video, but some of the weekly patterns are doing okay. Okay, and another thing is the Bitcoin has just been kind of oversold with this. Okay, and it might retrace, but that's another thing here is there's way too much commentary, there's way too much noise. Like I tried to call out Donald yesterday in a very respectful way. Even though I have very little respect for him, I still tried to keep it professional and say, like, look, he's getting a lot of flack for, he claims that he's being right on all these charts and coins and blah blah blah. And I'm right a lot of times too. Like if I'm comparing some of my charts to him, I don't even follow him anymore, but I tend to have the same accuracy that he does, but he gets a lot more hate for it. Yes, because he's also a bigger account, but also because of your attitude. I try not to give anybody an attitude unless I'm just having a bad day, and that happens to everyone, right? We need to be respectful. We need to have community involvement with that. Like even if you guys don't agree with things, like I'm old enough. I'm actually older than you might think that I am, and I'm old enough to remember when you did not like you could have a difference of opinions with someone and still be friends with that person. Okay, and that's the thing. Like right, like you know the new generate whatever you want to call it, right? Like, or it's just with social media, like everybody's so polarizing, and that causes people to hate things that they just don't agree with. Okay, and that's so silly. It's so silly. It's childish. It's not a way to build community. It's not a way to, all it does is make people bitter and lonely and all these other things. Like, I got way too much stuff to worry about other than one, making someone upset on purpose on Twitter, or two, like being upset by somebody on Twitter that doesn't even know who I am, somebody that I wouldn't take advice from anyway, and I don't even know who they are, right? So why would you leave mindshare for those kind of things? Okay. And so I detoured a little bit, but that was related to trading, how we try to view things between the right and wrong and this and that. But as far as this goes, the market is weak right now. Okay. And that's where, be mindful of your capital, be mindful of who you follow on Twitter, including me. Like I never really tell anybody to follow me, okay? The only reason I tell someone to ask for a follow is if I'm starting a new project and I want to gain some traction, and it's completely optional. I think that that's very reasonable, okay? That's also why I don't do sponsors. That's why I have paid products. Okay, I don't want sponsors because that creates extra friction, okay? And I see nothing wrong with having it like a paid thing. But it adds added friction. I've seen way too many people have sponsorships, and those sponsorships end up being trash. And that's just not something I want to be a part of, right? A lot of these products that I even like, I don't know if I would not want to force them on you. And then two, I can make more, you know, I can make more money with paid products. Like you're supporting me directly, right? When like a lot of people have Woo, like Donald and some other people have Woo as a sponsor, and that's great. I'm not dissing the sponsor at all. I'm respectful towards Woo. I've never used the product. They seem okay to me as of today. Now, that being said, that just because I think that that's the case doesn't mean that you should be on there or that you shouldn't be on there. That's for you to decide, okay? And so, what tends to happen with sponsorships, especially exchange basic sponsorships, they used to give you a monthly retainer or stipend or whatever. And so it would vary. It honestly would vary between 1,000 to like $20,000. There was a huge range. Like there's big accounts that I still work for that I used to work for in the previous cycles, and they would get 15, 20 grand a month or more, 50,000 a month even for some of these really big ones, off of these sponsors, right? But they don't do that as much anymore. Now they're doing commission based, okay? And so a lot of the reasons for the commission base is, you know, to one to get more money to the exchanges because the exchanges are hurting. Go to Glassdoor, check out the statistics. Exchanges are not holding as much crypto as they used to be. DeFi is still going strong here. Okay, and another reason it's also for these exchanges as sponsors to give less money. Okay, because I still work with people behind the scenes for my marketing agency, and a lot of people that try to sponsor with exchanges, they don't get much money anymore. Okay, they can work as hard as they can, and then they're only going to make $1,000 in a month. Well, if you're trading eight figures, $1,000 is nothing to you. Okay, and so that's why. Long story, I kind of rambled, but that's why I have those. That's why I don't have sponsors. Okay, it's even my low products like $20 a month, where I give you 30, 40 coins a week. We discuss things, we do everything else that supports me directly. Okay, I use that to buy a cup of coffee. I use that to help my son go to his therapies, things like that. Okay, and it's not all like fancy, compassionate things. Sometimes it is literally just buying a cup of coffee. Okay, but that supports me directly, and that actually supports me more than actually having like an exchange-based sponsor. So anyway, I rambled with that, but my point is the market is kind of changing that the exchange sponsorship is a sign that the market is changing. And I can also see that directly here with Bitcoin and altcoins. Like the fact that Bitcoin is a little heavy here, I think shows that, the market is being weighed a little bit differently and we could get a rebound here. So we'll get into the charts. We'll see how true this might actually be. And we'll just continue on with this. Let's go to Bitcoin first. All right, so let's talk Bitcoin. Let's focus on the weekly here. We kind of mentioned a little bit about this, but I'm going to kind of refresh that and then say everything here in this section because I know a lot of people like to skip around. So first things first, I kind of want to look at what has taken place thus far. So we had the big run up really from basically end of last year, had this weekly divergence that was a key consideration of mine. And we went down, we had this retest structure here, and we have the drop down. So that's a very basic high time frame analysis with price action. And we can kind of look at this a little bit more. And so, because here's your big zone right here. This was the big zone that I was looking at. We had the touch up here. We had the break above, which I thought that was really good. And then we had the deviation inside. And I mentioned when this occurred that deviations, you guys know if you are in my Nowhere Discord or my Nowhere Premium Discord, you know that I talk so much about deviations. And so this is one of the reasons why. This is the top. It has still been the top. We're not even close to this area anymore. And so that's kind of what I looked at here. Deviation here, deviation to the upside here, deviation to the upside. Deviations. You really, if you're dealing with me, you need to understand that word. Okay, it is the number one. I'll teach this in the academy. My academy is available for a pre-order. I just got it launched today. The deviations are I'll have a section for patterns. Deviations are the number one pattern that you need to learn. Okay, I do not teach fractals. I do not believe in fractals as far as an effective tool to trade with. Deviations can be misinterpreted for that, but what's the reality is with deviations is that they're fake outs. Okay, when you have a fake out, you lose. So with this example here, you had a demand structure, you had it push above the demand into all-time highs, and then we faked back out to the downside, telling us that this demand structure is not valid, okay? And until this breaks, this is no longer valid, okay? We actually did try to break this, then we broke back below, so that reconfirmed the deviation. Honestly, if you go to a higher time frame, it's actually going to show it to you a little bit more concentrated, and that's why. And so this is why I talk about deviations so much, is because they are so effective, and we're still dealing with the effects of this deviation, okay? And so this is another reason why I don't really like to talk about the nitty gritty throughout each particular trading hour, okay? I rarely trade under 4 hour time frames ever, okay? I can count the number of trades I've traded under 4 hour this year on one hand with probably several fingers cut off. That's how little I trade on 4 hour because it's not effective to me, okay? Because if things are trending well, so for example, if we're trending upwards like this, I have no reason to trade on lower time frames because it's going to trend upwards, right? I'd rather trade the 4 hour with size. I'm okay looking at lower time frames. That's not what I'm saying. Okay, I'm not saying what I'm okay with looking at lower time frames to find maybe an entry point, but I do so with a higher time frame context in mind. I don't trade on the 1 hour or trade on the 5 minute chart and then you know trade it maybe 12 hours later. That's not what I do. Okay, I trade on the 4 hour or higher, and then I usually take several days for that to pan out. Because if things are trending, that's going to be a very effectual thing to do. Um, or a profitable thing to do, because if let's say I just I'm cherry picking, I know, but let's say I long here, and so you got a pretty good run up, things are trending well, so my profits are going to do well as long as I know, as long as I firmly believe that things are going to go up. I long, I don't short, I long, and so things are going to go up, right? If things are not going well, like this, like we're in a chop structure, it doesn't pay well to really trade one way or the other, so you are range bound. But in many cases, those choppy conditions are too choppy for those types of trading applications. A lot of people think that they can scalp. A lot of people think they can do all that stuff. They really can't. In my experience, scalping is one of the hardest things to do. That's why I don't do it, because it's not worth it. Okay, first of all, it's not worth it, and most of the time, crypto assets trend anyway. So why would you spend time doing things that give you less risk to reward, that are harder to do in the first place and don't happen very often? You see what I'm saying? So that's kind of what I'm looking at, right? So that's the price action perspective. Now what about Aroon? So with Aroon, we had this push up above. It went bearish here, so it's been bearish for about 3 weeks. I mentioned that 3 weeks ago. I mentioned on June 10th. I don't know what exactly how close to 3 weeks that is, but it's roughly 15 days, I think. So that's, or 14 days, I guess 2 weeks. So that's when I brought that up, that we would get this down move. We got this down move. We are retracing a little bit. I hope this does recover. I hope this is the weekly low. In fact, then we'll see. But as far as the Aroon structure, this is what that looks like. We have a small cross here. From the cross perspective, it's about 14, 11% to 4, it says 11% on the chart, which is a very weak one. The lower the number, the weaker that's going to be. And so we already have the bulls trying to cross up. Now, if they don't cross up soon, that means we're going to consolidate back to the downside. So we'll see where this goes. Based off of my experience, I think we might be doing something like this. Okay, we have this distribution up here. We have a push to the downside with this band. You can see this band right here is trying to shrink, okay, because it used to be up really big here. Now it's getting smaller. Sometimes that gives you like these pinch points, right? And what these pinch points typically try to do is you get the drop down and it squeezes back to the upside. See what I'm saying? Drops down, squeezes back to the upside. And so that's kind of what I'm looking at here. Excuse me a second. So with that in mind, I think what we can do is drop here, consolidate, drop one more time, and then squeeze back up. So this makes me think that we're going to continue in this price action for about a month. Okay, I think the next 2 weeks are going to be a little bit more neutral or break even. We're going to get one more drop, and then we can get to the upside potential. And so that next drop might actually be the bottom. Okay, and so a lot of people here, I just saw somebody on YouTube saying, "Is this the bottom? Is this the bottom?" Like I'm seeing everybody like trying to long do this, that. If the bottom really is the bottom, you're not gonna have the majority of people saying that it is. That's just how it is. That's just how market psychology works. Okay, a lot of people have just now gotten to the realm of, all right, this was our major move. This must be the bottom, therefore. That's not true. That's not always true. In fact, that's rarely true. Market psychology doesn't give us that opportunity for that to be true. And typically, bottoms happen when most people don't expect it to be bottoms. That's why they are bottoms. That's why bottoms occur, because the demand structure is so low that it allows it to move up. Okay, the reason bottoms actually happen are not because there are buyers. It's because there are no sellers. Okay, so like look back here from the 18 20,000 sub 20,000, we had people selling, 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 selling. And so, well, why did we go up? There's nobody to sell left over. Everybody had a chance to sell. Okay, everybody had 2 years, almost 2 years worth of selling opportunities, and nobody's willing to sell. Okay, that's why I bought there. Okay, that's why I bought at 16.8. And so that's the reason things happen. It's not because people are buying, it's because people are not selling. There's a very big difference in those two. And that's the same thing here. It's not that people are selling here, it's people are just not buying here. That there wasn't a lot of retail discussion about Bitcoin at the highs. There just wasn't. Okay. All of it was ETF related. All of it was Boomer 401k stuff related, right? None of it was actual retail buying like it has been for the last 2 3 cycles. Okay. And so that's part of the market psychology behind that. And so as far as the Aroon goes, that means with as far as this band is concerned, now we're fully into the bear market here. And my experience when you have this is very similar to this right here. This is why I'm kind of focusing on, this is not a fractal, because I just, I already told you guys I don't do fractals, but you could probably get the run up here and then the push back down. That's what I'm looking at. And a lot of people think that we're going to bottom here. We may. I'm not saying that we won't, or we might get close to bottoming out, but these, I can't emphasize enough, and I don't emphasize enough, that when Aroon gives me these types of signals, they very rarely reverse so quickly. And so that's why I'm not in a rush to trade either, because you're going to have time. Okay, you're at least going to get 2 more candles with this, so you're going to at least have 2 more weeks of opportunity. The worst thing that you can do is trade immediately thinking this is the absolute bottom, and then you lose 10% before we run up or whatever, right? Like, your goal right now should be preserving the money that you have, preserving the capital that you have, and that's it. Okay, the profits will come later. I've mentioned this before, that in that perspective, I treat trading like a football game, American football game, or it could be European soccer, whatever you want, right, or football, whatever. In most, it could even be hockey. In most sports, there's offense and defense, right? That's just the point. Forget about the sport. Offense, defense. Okay, a good defense can win a game, and that's how I'm looking at this now. Okay, you're going to do well. You're going to have a high chance, and this is not financial advice, but you're going to have a high chance of succeeding if your goal is to not lose. If you try to focus on not losing, you're going to have a much better chance of profitability and getting what you want. Okay. The people that tend to do the worst are when people try to win as much as they can. I'm going to win it all. I'm going to bet more. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Okay. I'm going to try to bet as much as I can. I'm going to 100x leverage because I'm going to 100x my opportunity, when they don't look at the 100% risk opportunity as well. Okay. So in most cases, in that perspective, you're going to do more. You're going to have a better chance of success if you, instead of trying to win, you just try not to lose. There is a very big difference in the two. So Aroon has some ways to go. I think we could bounce. I think there's a good chance this could be the low for the week actually, but that doesn't mean that this is over. So as far as our side goes, we're at 50%. So this is pretty good. I think this is a high time frame. This is a good bounce area. It tends to be a good perspective where we go up. The last time we bounced here, that was pretty good. And I actually want to go over this because a lot of people don't focus on this. So for example, your 50 level was here, and then you went all the way to here. So that was 25%. So, and that's okay. And then your other one was, let's just say it was here. And so now you're going, this was a bounce, so that didn't count. So now we're at the current candle. And even with the drop, we're looking at 113%. So take that 113%, add that 25, right? So I can't even do the math all of a sudden, but you're looking at like 138%. Okay. Are you 138% up on your portfolio since January of 2023? If you're not, you need to do the RSI 50. Okay. That's just all it is to it. And that's just how I perceive it. RSI 50 on these high time frames are very effective. So that's what I'm looking at with this daily time frame. I did cover this in the mini market update, so I won't cover too long. But I was looking at this drop here. I did say that we would try to get this 61,000% as a push. I think that we could retrace this by the end of the day. It is very possible. If not, now we're kind of stuck in no man's land between this structure here, but mainly right here at this zone with the low at about 58,400. And so that's based off of the retest structure for that. The problem with this is I don't really hold this as a retest point. And so if we close in between this range, now this is our range. Okay, this area, I'll get rid of that. So that becomes our new range, right? And so that's not the best area. The good news is we're down at 24% RSI, so that tends to be pretty low for price action. We don't tend to go there too much. We do every now and then. I think we about three or four times, about twice a year. So and but that just shows you, like, if we bounce from that area, that's a pretty good area to bounce from. It's a good sign that could be close to a bottom. We can kind of take a look at that here, but it wasn't necessarily a sign of bottom because this came back down, right? So that's worth mentioning. I would be mindful of things like divergences. So this actually sets us up for a potential divergence opportunity if we push up above, retest, drop down below. The lower the original marker here, which is 24, is pretty low. The chances of us retracing and then coming back down, and the RSI is, like, let's say it's like 28, that's a divergence long. Okay, that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at divergences on both extremes, on the bull side and the bear side. Okay, so we'll look and see where that goes. But it's pretty much it for Bitcoin. Let's go ahead and go to Ethereum. All right, on to Ethereum here. I'm not going to spend much time on Ethereum and Solana as I did with Bitcoin because Bitcoin gives us the context for most of the market conditions. That is why the total market cap looks much more like Bitcoin than other market cap totals because of that. And so we'll get started here. As you guys probably can see on the screen, that Ethereum is down about 2.5%, where Bitcoin is still down 5.5% roughly after it went down about 7. So that does give us some context. The market is looking okay. In fact, the market is kind of recovering a little bit across the board here, and so I think that is worth considering. Now, let's go ahead and remove this for now. We had the run up here from about 4,000. We had the bearish retest from this zone. I mentioned that again, you have this deviation. We had actually a double deviation, whatever you want to call it. There's a different way to look at it on different time frames, but that mapped out here. Now, the big difference that I see, maybe you see it, is that Aroon actually has crossed bullishly on the weekly. We got a bullish cross here, and so that gives us some context. And this is a very interesting context because we are bullish here at resistance from an Aroon perspective. Now, one of two things tends to happen. Either one, we get a run up, or two, we actually consolidate. So what we need to do is maintain this bullish price action for the next 2 weeks. Okay, you have 2 weeks to kind of push this up before bears start to kind of take the momentum suck out of that, right? And so the big key for that would be just to flip 3,500 on the weekly. That's a very easy thing to ask. And so we'll see if we get that. Now, another thing is, the Aroon doesn't flip too often on the weekly, right? So we had one here, and so these the colors just represent the crosses here basically, but for like a better time, but you can see it doesn't really cross too often. This is the biggest one that we have here, so don't think that this might flip bearish all of a sudden. And so this gives me a good sign. We have a good push up here. I would not be surprised if this is the low for the week, just simply based off of this structure. And so we can look at this a little bit more on the daily, see how that reacts. RSI is holding above good, just fine. Ethereum is much more um, fragmented, in my opinion, as far as its market structure than Bitcoin is. I don't. Ethereum does not look very clean to me. I don't know how people can trade this. I think it looks very unclean in its structure. And so let's go ahead and look here. Now, I actually am going to bring back that to go back to the daily to give us that context, right? So we have this push up here. I mentioned because you had the push up, you have a breaker here, which we had the weekly divergence, had the drop down, and now we touched that. We touched the breaker. We technically got below that, and so this qualifies for me for a touch. This qualifies for me for a potential bottom signal with this. You guys know in my Nowhere Discord group, both the free and the premium, that I look for a bullish candle after that. Okay, that gives me confirmation. I have no confirmation if there's no bullish candle. Otherwise, it could just drop again and again and again and again. So we'll see where this goes. I would like to have another day. I would have to have one day of green, honestly. That's all I really ask. But or we could have a fake out above the structure, which would be a green candle anyway. And that if we get a fake out here deviation, we're probably going straight to 3,700. So, but we did qualify for this touch. This is good enough for me. I'm interested in better price action as far as bullish price action. So we'll see where this goes. But that's pretty much it for Ethereum. Very quick, very clean as far as interpretation, not exactly its market structure. But all eyes are still on Bitcoin to have this to look at. Let's go to Solana, especially now that's in the green. So let's go ahead and go to Solana. I'm going to go to the weekly time frame first. A lot of things to kind of look at here, but we're going to kind of erase that. Go from the structure here. We had this consolidation order block area that actually went to the downside instead. Again, this created some sort of deviation, and so very very interesting. Not sure why that's there. I'll just get rid of it. But very interesting part of the markets because it didn't really didn't really have a specific price point with that. So anyway, we had the drop down here going into the bearish zone. This thing is bothering me, so let's go ahead and go to a different time or chart. There we go, and get rid of this. I like clean charts. So anyway, we had the drop down here. Aroon's been bearish for a couple weeks now. Pretty interesting wicks thus far, but this is the first day of the market. So now, as far as Aroon goes, we have a very small consolidation marker on this. Had the cross at 11%. This is actually a pretty decently bullish sign. Perhaps the smaller the pattern right here, typically the more pressure is applied to the charts. And so, and one of the things is like here at this zone, this was not quite super small, but this was choppy, but all of a sudden it just impulsed straight up. So that's what could happen. RSI is basically at 50%. So we got kind of the same application as Ethereum. And that's probably also why, alts are probably not doing as bad right here. Other than that, there's not really too much else to say with this. We did lose this weekly structure here. But this wasn't really too significant anyway. I guess it kind of was. We had the push up here, retest back down below. So we could retest this structure if you're looking for high time frames, and that's basically the 112 to 120 range. 120 is a pretty good range for the daily, by the way. We'll get to that in just a second. And so kind of stuck within these two price points. Let's go ahead and go to the daily. And so going with this zone, I should say, is that we had this is your kind of retest structure. Didn't quite even get up there, kind of broke back down below. Had your liquidity signal here that we are currently holding. And so this isn't too bad. I think that this could come back and help us out. I want to actually briefly go to the 4 hour because we have a bearish channel here that I've had my eye on. And I told a lot of people in Discord about this. And so we're kind of holding this zone so far. Very choppy conditions, but I'm looking for a break of this one way or the other. I think this could break to the upside. I think that that's looking pretty solid, honestly. But if you get rid of all this, sorry, I'm bouncing everywhere. This is probably a better context for the zone. You had your test, your retest, and then your I guess second retest or whatever. So you want this to hold in this structure. And so I think that this is looking okay. Another thing is you also have, this is actually part of a much bigger context with this. And so you have a really good support area. I think it could bounce here pretty decently, honestly. I think this is a high opportunity where this could bounce. But we'll see where this goes. And that's not just because it's green. It's because if this doesn't hold, now we're going to be pushing sub 120, even 105, and that's just not something that we want to do, right? So overall, I guess that's Solana. Not really much to cover with that. We have that channel that I'm wanting for that to break bullish out of. This needs to kind of break the trend line here. I'm not interested in anything really until we break that trend. And so that's one reason here. Like the markets could recover, but we don't know if that could just be a couple days and then we come back and go down again. We are so deep into this. We are on bearish structures on the weekly, right? So we need to recover at least on the daily, in my opinion. And so we're not even recovered on the 4 hour yet, or even some of these not even on the 1 hour. And so you got to really understand. You got to give it that context. So anyway, that is Solana. Let's go ahead and summarize the video. All right, so we discussed Bitcoin here on the weekly. We went ahead and said, this deviation was pretty strong. We're still going the down move. It had a much higher drop down versus the rest of the market, and that is concerning in some sense, but also not concerning in other sense. This could be the sign that the market is trying to round out. I said that this could potentially be the bottom, but I also think there's a much higher probability of this bouncing for a couple weeks and getting one more drop down, kind of in the middle of July, and then bouncing from there instead. I think a lot of altcoins are kind of exhausted, and so I think prices could go up. And I mentioned based off of the bottom from the Bitcoin generational bottom, is that prices could go up not because there are buyers, but because there are no more sellers left to deal with. So that's going to be a byproduct of that potentially. And so looking for that, I talked about 58,000. That's exactly what we got. If we drop down longer, we're going to hit 52. If not, bottoms in play. Going to Ethereum, we talked about the weekly a little bit. We talked about how this is bullish on the weekly versus the bearish position on that. On the daily, we have the drop down towards the breaker. So this qualifies as a complete retest for me. I am ready to look more bullish on prices going forward with Ethereum. Going to Solana, we have not a good weekly structure. We just printed bullish or bearish down here. Unlike Bitcoin, which was a little more neutral, this is the most bearish of the three. But we'll see how this reaction is. We have a small consolidation here, which could be a sign that we have some sort of high pressure area. That doesn't mean we're going to go up or down. That's a bi-directional indicator, and so we'll see where that goes. RSI is hovering pretty well, but on the daily, it looks like we might have a support structure in play. We'll see where this goes, and so also you have a 4 hour channel that we are looking at to break first before we think about any sort of bullish price action. So anyway, that's the video. Let me know what you think. Also, I didn't talk about Apex Academy Volume 2 in this video. I'm going to talk about it every single day for the next 7 days. So go ahead and look for that and sign up if you're interested in trading with that perspective. I hope you have a good day. I hope you're preserving your capital, and I'll see you next time.